Welcome to this IELTS Writing Task 2 video in which we're going to go through some of the key functions that you'll need to write your essays. So in this video we'll show you how to express hopes, wishes and regrets, express worries and fears, and express predictions. These are all things that you may need to do in your exam. We'll show you how to write positive comments and praise, criticism, and how to refute ideas. This will probably be key. We'll show you how to refer to advantages and disadvantages, as well as how to refer backward and forward in a text. And we'll look at describing certainty, possibility, and necessity, as well as giving your opinion, qualifying your opinion, reporting the views of others, and introducing a new point, as well as making suggestions. So all of these are key things which you will probably need to do in your writing. You might want to watch this video once, but probably not again. Mercifully, there is a PDF, so you might take the PDF just to give you a reference of some of the language that you can use. So we'll start by showing you how to express wishes and regrets. You very often want to do this in the conclusion. We can use the verb to hope and also the phrase, "It is my heartfelt or fervent or vehement hope that." We can use the verb to wish quite a lot in IELTS writing. So we can use it when we want to express annoyance or frustration. So I wish that something would stop or would change. And we can also use it when we want to change the current situation. So I wish the world was or were a more peaceful place. We can also use wish when we want to refer to things in the past. So I wish the government had taken steps. This is what we wish the government did in the past. And we can also use regret in a similar way. So you may regret migrating or regret having migrated to the city. This is something you're unhappy about now, which happened in the past. And we can use conditional sentences as well to express regrets about the past and unhappiness with the past. So in the if clause we have had invested, so that's a past perfect, and in the main clause here we have could, might or would be, so we're describing a current situation and the reason why that current situation is and how it could have been different. And in the bottom sentence, again, past perfect in the if clause, and in the main clause could, might or would have developed, so that's referring to something else that happened in the past. Moving on to expressing worries and fears, so you can find something extremely worrying and we can use the phrase genuinely concerned about something or genuinely concerned that something is the case. And we can also use lots of phrases to express the fact that we are frightened, that we have fear. So you can be extremely fearful. You can talk about a looming crisis, so a terrible problem which is coming nearer and nearer. We can suffer or face dire consequences, so there can be terrible results of what's happened. We can use the phrase to have a catastrophic effect when something has a terrible result. And we can refer to terrible repercussions or terrible ramifications, and repercussions and ramifications are bad results. We can also refer to the doomsday scenario or the nightmare scenario, so a very worrying, frightening future possibility. Let's move on now to expressing predictions, and sometimes you want to predict the future, so we can use the structure it is estimated that or it is predicted that. We can use the verbs to anticipate and expect. We can use the phrase there is a realistic expectation that something will happen, and we can use the verb to predict that. It's extremely likely that, to talk about a future probability, and there is a real or genuine likelihood that works in a very similar way. There is the distinct possibility that we use when something might happen. We're not completely sure, but there is a possibility, and it's not beyond the realms of possibility. That is a nice phrase to talk about a future possibility, which we don't think will happen, but is not impossible. Moving on, and positive comments and praise. Sometimes you would like to say something positive, and there are many ways you can do that and lots of language you can use. We can refer to the several benefits associated with something. something being extremely beneficial, or we can say that it can have positive outcomes, positive results, positive consequences or effects. There are convincing arguments in support of something, or there are excellent reasons why something would be a good thing to do. We can use the phrase would be an extremely positive step, or would be a step in the right direction, or would be a step forward to talk about progress, something which is a good idea. We can use the phrase would have benefits, almost too numerous to mention, when you think that something would be extremely good. And we can say this would attract a great deal of praise from experts. So these are some phrases you can use when you're being positive. You want to describe something which works, something which is good. Probably we need more phrases for criticism and refuting ideas, so that saying things are wrong. And not surprisingly, there are plenty of options here. You can describe something as entirely ridiculous. You can describe it as a preposterous suggestion, and you can say that a claim is quite simply preposterous. You might use the phrase that there is or there are a whole range of reasons why something is disastrous or catastrophic or detrimental, and you can have a sentence, anyone who believes this clearly has a limited grasp of the matter or situation. Or similarly, this would be an extremely short-sighted approach, or this is an utterly nonsensical idea. So these are all ways of criticizing and refuting ideas, saying that they are wrong. There are more. We can describe the considerable drawbacks. We can say that something could have negative outcomes, negative repercussions, consequences, or ramifications. We can refer to several strong and convincing or persuasive arguments against something and say that these have been put forward. And you can use the sentence, I am convinced that implementing this proposal would be counterproductive or pointless. Good adjectives to know, counterproductive and pointless. You can say putting this proposal or this idea into practice would be a retrograde or backward step, so it would take us in the wrong direction. And as far as I'm concerned, this would be a disastrous step, a disastrous policy or strategy or approach. So lots of lovely language you can impress the examiner with when you're criticizing or saying that something is a bad idea. There's even more. So I find the argument entirely unconvincing. You can say, in fact, quite the opposite is true. When you want to put forward an idea, then say it's completely wrong. There is little or no evidence to support this view or this assertion or this claim, or in actual fact, all evidence points in the opposite direction when you want to indicate that there is no evidence to support something. You can also write all the evidence supports the opposing viewpoint, and I fundamentally disagree with this notion. So these are all very useful phrases with complex language which the examiner will appreciate. And next we're going to look at how to refer to advantages and disadvantages. If you get an advantages and disadvantages essay, then it's great if you don't keep repeating the same words. So there are many things that you can use here. You can refer to the pluses and minuses, the pros and cons. You can refer to a positive and negative perspective or angle, and you can use positives and negatives as nouns. You can say they're finely balanced, that it's difficult to say that one is better than the other. You can refer to the advantages outweighing the disadvantages, and you can refer to the benefits far or considerably outweighing the drawbacks. You can write about upsides and downsides, and also merits and problems or issues. So lots of ways of avoiding repetition there. And you can refer backward and forward in a text, and this can be very useful as well. So you can use phrases like as mentioned, or noted, or explained, or argue, or stated in the previous paragraph, and then you can write your point. So here, divorce is undoubtedly on the increase. This is something that you said before, but you want to emphasize, so you want to repeat it, but also indicate that you know that you are repeating yourself. Other phrases, as previously mentioned, or noted, or explained, or argued, or stated. As mentioned, noted, explained, argued, or stated above, and the aforementioned or above mentioned points. you can refer to. And then you can refer forward to what's coming later. So in the paragraphs which follow, this can be in your introduction when you indicate your plan for the essay, in the paragraphs below, in the remainder of this essay, or the rest of this essay. So these are phrases to refer forward to say what's coming. Describing certainty is important. There are lots of phrases. There seems absolutely no doubt that, it is an indisputable fact that, it's certainly the case that, without a shadow of a doubt, it's impossible to deny, undoubtedly, and you can also use indubitably in a very similar way to undoubtedly. You also want to refer to possibility. So the likelihood is extremely high or relatively high. It's incredibly likely that, and again we use this phrase when there is a strong possibility that something will happen, and we can indeed use the phrase there's an extremely strong possibility that something will happen. You can refer to something as being distinctly possible when you think there is a high chance, and there is very little probability or very little possibility when you think there is a low chance. Similarly, it's highly unlikely that, and it's almost inconceivable or almost impossible that, when something very nearly certainly will not happen. We can refer to necessity as well. You can write that it's absolutely imperative that something happens. It's essential, vital, or crucial. These are very good alternatives to necessary and important. Of course, you can write that something is necessary or that it must happen. You can indicate that steps must be taken or something has to be done or needs to be done. You can write that it is the duty of somebody to do something, such as the duty of politicians to improve the situation. And you can write the phrase, our leaders have a clear obligation, or maybe a clear moral obligation to do something. It's necessary that action is taken. Giving your opinion is obviously very important in an opinion essay and in other types of essay as well. So good to know some phrases. I'm utterly convinced that, I'm entirely of the opinion that, it's my fervently held belief or view. So fervently held means that you have a very strong view. We can also use strongly held belief or view, and we can use the adverb fervently. So I fervently believe that, I wholeheartedly believe that, to indicate that you have a strong belief. You can fully support something, and you can write, as far as I am concerned, something is true from my perspective or from my viewpoint, and I am implacably or thoroughly or vehemently opposed to, when you want to indicate that you are strongly against something. And you can qualify your opinion as well. So you can use phrases like something needs to take into account or consideration. And you can also use the phrase ought not to lose sight of, as well as to a certain extent, to some degree, and in some circumstances, in certain circumstances, or there are cases, and by no means always the case. And you can use the phrase perhaps an exception could be made, and there are certainly situations, or there are certainly instances where something is true. So when you're saying that generally something is true, but maybe not always, maybe not all of the time, these phrases are very useful. And of course, reporting the views of others can be important. You can say something which indicates that many people hold a view, or that experts hold a view. So it's commonly believed that. That means that most people think it's true. It's often thought that, and it is a widely held view that. It's considered by many that, and it's often argued that, and experts in the field generally agree that, and those who understand this issue are often convinced that. So these are all great phrases when you want to say that either experts or many people also hold these views. There are other phrases. It's often been stated or claimed by those with expertise in this field that, or there is a consensus among experts and commentators that, a significant proportion of the population is convinced that, and on the whole, members of the public tend to believe that. It's sometimes claimed that, scientists or economists maintain that, and teachers fiercely defend the notion that. So a mixture of phrases to do with most people or experts. And now we turn to introducing a new point. Very often you want to in your essay, so there are many ways you can do that. Phrases like perhaps the most important argument relates to the fact that, one of the most significant points is that, it should be clearly stated that, it has to be pointed out that, it also needs to be mentioned that. So these are all phrases very useful because they can be followed with a that clause. You can indicate that something has to be highlighted or ought to be highlighted. Another relevant argument is that, and the point that something needs emphasizing. So lots of ways of introducing a new point, saying that it's important. Here are some more. Another major and relevant point is connected to the idea that, it's worth mentioning that, it's worth pointing out that. A point which should be emphasized is that, an often overlooked point is that, one of the main reasons why is that, and it has to be acknowledged or admitted or accepted that. And we use this last one with acknowledged, accepted or admitted when you're putting forward a point which probably goes against your argument, which you are saying is true, but you are saying that reluctantly, unhappily. And finally, we come to giving suggestions. So there are some essays, such as problem and solution essays, where you often want to give a suggestion. So the most obvious solution would be, or probably the most effective strategy or approach or policy would involve, one approach likely to meet with success would be, or is, one option worth considering would be, or is, educators could consider, or maybe politicians could consider, or parents could consider. One way in which this issue could be tackled involves, and then explain what that is, or an appropriate way of dealing with this issue would be, or is. Some more ways of giving suggestions. The authorities should, motorists ought to, or I strongly believe it would be beneficial, or it would be beneficial to do something. If individuals wanted to make the world a better place, they could start by, and follow that with an ing form, such as increasing. If I were leader of my country, I would. What would you do? I feel it would make a great deal of sense to do something. It would be a tremendously good idea to do something, and under no circumstances should. So this is when you think something is a terrible idea and we shouldn't do it. Well, we hope that watching this video wasn't a terrible idea. As we said at the beginning, there is a PDF and you might like to download that now, so you've got a list of all these phrases. These are by no means the only phrases that you can use, but you're never going to need all of them, so just learning a few for each function can really help you in the exam, make your writing seem more formal and get you a higher grade. We look forward to seeing you, and thank you for watching.